Today, we're looking at a gray ink by Levenger Smokey. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that if you want to skip around, you can, but if you got the time, check out the entire video. You can follow me over on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put it into this Noodler's Naponset with a music nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. This first writing sample is done with a standard set of paper, Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, there are additional writing samples that will occur later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in bottle form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, some very nice shading going on. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, still very nice shading, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation, and we get that in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, very light Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. I take that back because I'm seeing a couple darker spots like the K in quick, the he and the Y in lazy looks a little bit, so there is a light peppering of shading going on here, 10 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very light peppering of shading throughout here, a little more obvious than the extra fine for having the thicker lines, 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine and the medium show color variation, although it shows more in the extra fine, and it showed much better in the medium writing than the extra fine writing. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice shading in here, very nice. The extra fine is lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very light peppering of shading throughout, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, much better shading here than here, 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation, although it's better in the medium than the extra fine. I agree with Vita that we learn a lot when we do multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that there is this light greenish gray. There's a slight green lean to this gray. It's forming a line at the bottom, bonding with the paper quickly, pushing its way up, and then we get a nice light purple coming in. That's what's making our very nice gray here and why we're getting such good shading. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now that greenish gray is very much forming a line on the bottom, really bonding with the paper, a little bit of it pushing up, but with the purple, there's not nearly as much of that purple showing through either, which makes me feel like that might be bonding with the filter paper. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, there's a slight bit of blowout with a lowercase h, but for the most part, I feel safe using this in a note-taking situation because I can clearly read everything that's there. So if you want to be able to highlight 3 days later, go ahead. Now water, you see, is barely having any effect on this. This falls in line with what we saw in the second chromatography, where a lot of this ink is really bonding with the paper. Pen flush is certainly breaking it down a whole lot more than the water did. Now those very dark blue spots, I can't account for why or where they came from. I'm not sure if what blue was in there gathered in that spot, or if that was a transfer from a paper towel for me being a filthy slob. That being said, water was not enough for me to get this out of my pen. However, pen flush very quickly got all of it out of there. The 1/3 bleach solution completely removed it from the paper, but I didn't need it to get it out of my pen. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I've linked that video and put that in here for you. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Levenger Smokey has a viscosity of 2.01, making it a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Levenger Smokey has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this a fast dry ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Levenger Smokey, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now that little bit of purple that showed up in the chromatography really made me think of matching this with a purple. So I chose Robert Oster's Summer Storm. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, P. Berger, and white lines paper. Here we're looking at the yellow Rhodia paper, not to look for any kind of performance change, really to see if we get any kind of tone change for what's going on. And we see that this particular ink, it bonds so quickly with the paper, and it is actually very opaque in what's going down. It really does, it covers up the lines completely. So it's very opaque, it goes down, it's got no tone shift at all for being on yellow paper. Just means this is a strong ink, strong with the force. P. Berger, a French rule student grade paper, very minor ghosting. Wouldn't stop me from using the back of the page if I was a student, no bleeding. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very decent peppering of shading throughout here of darker spots, and only 1 second to dry, so that's very impressive. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, a little bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, still a very light peppering of darker letters here with 2 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both do show us color variation, we do get it in the writing. And last up is white lines paper, with no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some light shading throughout. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice amount of shading going on, 3 seconds to dry, still very impressive, such a fast drying ink giving shading. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very nice shading going on. Look at that word quick and what's going on. Beautiful, look at over, fantastic. 4 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us good color variation when you look left to right, and we do get it in the writing, and that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Levenger's Smokey? Gray inks are something that is very difficult to get right. It can be too dark and look like a faded black, or too light and just really look gross on the page. But this one, I think this gray is absolutely done right. What nib and pen will make the best writing experience? To avoid it being too dark, don't use a very wet pen, but a medium flow, medium or fine nib really puts down the perfect tone on the paper. If you've made it this far, and according to my analytics, 50% of you aren't, and you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.